fact, as we become more digital, it is extremely important that HR departments and managers and employees start to adjust to a new reality, a new working environment, a new way of going ahead and doing things. This will be different. It'll be different going forward for the future. And now's the time to start doing that. So with that in mind, we have talked to MindForest and said, hey guys, you guys are really experts at this kind of stuff. Can you give us a first look at things that people need to think about and take into consideration so that we can make sure that this digital transformation and the digitization of the workplace culture are properly done by companies for the benefit of the company and for the benefit of their employees. We are very, very pleased that Lene Pedersen, senior consultant, and Lisa Obringer, consultant from MindForest, are going to be leading us through this discussion. And without further ado, I pass it on to you two ladies with our thanks.
Thank you, Paul. So also a warm welcome from our side. And indeed, this will be on digital culture and also how your culture can either make or break your future. So to briefly introduce myself, my name is Lene Pedersen. As Paul said, I'm a consultant at MindForest, and together with my colleague Lisa, we'll be co-hosting this webinar. Lisa, do you want to just say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
Just so there's a face on you.
Hi.
So a few general rules for this webinar. We would kindly ask you to mute yourself when you're not talking so that there will be no background noises or phones ringing or something to distract. And then in case of a poor quality of your internet, then we suggest that you turn off the video because that way it will optimize the sound. Also, if you suddenly see one of us disappearing while we are talking, it is if we experience an issue on our side, then we will try to switch off the video in order to still get the sound and our speech across to you. Then there is a chat available. Some of you have already found it. And here, of course, you are warmly invited to introduce yourself to everyone, either for everyone or in private. As we are so many here today, it's just impossible to make a complete round of introduction. And also we invite you to write your questions in the chat and we will try to get back to them either during the webinar if it fits in or at a later stage when there is an open discussion at the end. So just before we get started, to those of you who don't know MindForest and what we do, we are a change management company and we have been on the market for over 20 years, only doing all kinds of complex change projects in Luxembourg, the greater region, a bit international as well. And this for small companies to larger institutions, private sector as well as public sector. And we do strategy and activation and roll-off. As such, this is really one of our key areas, together with engagement of employees and the empowerment of employees. Then newly, of course, with digitalization and process optimization in all sectors as well. And we do the cultural change and the anchoring of the culture within companies. And we are a multidisciplinary, that was the word, team, and therefore we can really go in from different angles and give you the best service. And that is also the way that we can co-create together and communicate and work differently, use visuals with our graphic team to really give you the best experience. And to get started, what I want to is just very briefly tell you what will you hear today. We will be discussing the importance of culture and especially in a digital transformation, because this is something people often neglect. Then we'll give you a couple of examples of digital cultures to inspire. And we'll be talking about the barriers when going digital and also how to actually create a digital culture that will help you to succeed in your digital transformation. And of course, have an open discussion at the end, learn from each other, and also throughout the webinar. So in order to get started, we would like to launch a poll for you. This will be anonymous. It will be a multiple choice where you can choose maximum 3 And I will launch the poll for you. The question is, in your opinion, which factors define a corporate culture the most? So I kindly ask you to choose 3 of them. And then when you have chosen them, to click the submit button at the end. You can scroll down to see all of them. And then we will share the answers. Remember, it's anonymous. Nothing will happen to anyone. There's no right and wrong. So please go ahead. You can see a lot coming in. Give you a couple of more minutes. Half of you have voted. I'll let you, some more coming. Very interesting to see the choices. There's still a few people who haven't voted. There was another one. So we're almost there. Another 2. Just give you a couple of seconds. We have 2 people who haven't voted yet, but
I won't be voting, right?
no, I know you're not counted. So I think you've had the chance to vote. So I'll end the poll and I will share the results with all of you. Can you see the results, everyone? So this is very interesting. The values seems to be very, very important to most of you. And the attitude and engagement of management is the one that is the most important. The least important, I'm just looking, the least important, rules and processes, interesting. But there's a good mix of it, you know. Some of it is most probably because of experience. Some of it hopes maybe, or just knowledge of the topic itself as well. They are all relevant to certain degrees. So I think we should, from that, I will stop sharing the screen and I'll let you tell a bit more, Lisa.
Yeah. I will move on to the first part of the presentation, which is really talking about culture and digital transformation. And let me sum it up a little bit. What is actually culture? So from the poll that you have seen, actually most of the elements are somehow part of the culture. Most of you referred to culture, to the informal system. I think most of them, you had engagement and values, which are really the informal part of the system. And as you can see, it counts for 70% of what actually an organizational culture is. The other system that we can find is the formal system, where you find the structures, the strategy, the processes, and the objectives, really tangible elements. For example, you can rewrite a process, you can review your strategy. So it's really the formalized system. But the one that is really important for any organization is the informal system. And why are we focusing here on culture and explaining what is culture linked to digital transformation? It is because in 2016, McKinsey released a survey, or the results of a survey. They actually interviewed more than 2,000 global executives. And one of their results was really to provide what are the main challenges their organization are facing when they decide to go through a digital transformation. And what is really interesting to see is that culture and behaviors are really dimensions that will make or break your digital transformation happen. It's not about having the right IT infrastructure, it's really about culture. And now let us understand why culture is so important for a digital transformation. When we talk about digital transformation, we mainly see it as changing how teams work together. And it's not just what technology they're using to get the work done. In order to illustrate that a little bit more, I have read like 2 very interesting articles from the Harvard Business Review, where they clearly state digital transformation is not about technology. And it's really interesting because they state that 70% of all digital transformation initiatives do not reach their goals. And why is that so? Well, essentially for them, it's because leaders don't go back to the essentials. They mainly focus on digital tools and how to use them. But they don't step back and look at the different mindsets that they have at their employees, and in the end, at the organizational culture that is happening inside the organization. The second article that underlies that is that usually you have companies having digital gurus coming in. And for them, clearly, when you just have a digital guru that comes in, you might not succeed with your digital transformation. It is so important to work together with people that are from the organization in order to be able also to understand the culture. Without the understanding of the culture, well, usually your initiatives fail. And the issue is that usually what is happening, organization, when they decide to set up a digital transformation and to go digital, they focus on the digital word. They want the technology and the tools, but they forget that it's really about people that will go through the changes. So technology has to be seen as an enabler and not as the differentiator. I want to define now what is actually a digital culture, because we're talking about that in the end. So we know what culture is, because I just explained it. It's the values, the characteristics, set of behaviors that defines how things get done. A digital culture refers to a culture shaped by the emergence and use of digital technologies. And so companies do not transform until people do. When you think about a digital transformation, think about it as a people journey. And I know it is easier said than done, because, well, if we go back to the metaphor of the cultural iceberg, when you try to set up a digital culture, it's like trying to move the iceberg, right? So it seems quite difficult in the beginning, but actually it's really worth it. And in order to underline this, I want to show you the results of one interesting research that was done by the London Business School. So what they did, they actually surveyed around, it was a bit more than 20,000 employees across Europe. And one of their findings was that companies with a strong and positive digital culture are likely to outperform competitors that do not have a culture like that. So they found out that in this type of companies, you usually have or end up having 5 times more employees who feel empowered, 4 times who feel more engaged, 3 times employees who feel more innovative, and 2 times more employees who feel more productive. And there you see how positive it can be when you decide to take the step in order to shift towards a positive digital cultures. What has to be said is that for each company, it's going to be a bit different, the way they will set it up, because you all start from, I would say, a different cultural setting. And through what we're going to say here in the webinar, and also the example that Lene is going to explain you right now, you really have to get inspired. It's not that you will apply it exactly the way they did it. There's not one size fit all process in order to become a digital culture, but you can get inspired by what is going to be proposed here throughout the whole webinar. And that being said, I had over to Lene to show you some examples of companies that succeeded doing this transformation.
Thank you, Lisa. So as Lisa just said, it is only to give you some inspiration. There is not a one size fits all, but we've chosen 3 very well-known companies to explore their digital culture. And this is mainly because, of course, here you have access to a lot of information, but also that a lot of us do seek inspiration from those companies. So if we get started, Netflix, some of you might know it, but not all of you, that it started out as a very traditional company. It was a DVD rental company in 1997. And here they were sending physical DVDs via post to customers only in the US. And then today, as we know, Netflix, this only happened in 2017 and really took off in 2010 when they picked up the streaming services and started then, of course, also having to change their culture within the company. So what is this culture of Netflix? What is their identity in order to succeed in this digital world, only providing digital services in the way of streaming? They have a very simple and scalable strategy, which is highly, highly data driven. And this, of course, this knowledge they use to serve their clients, but also to identify the needs and the changes in demands on the market very quickly in order to offer even better content. And then this also helps them through all the data to be very proactive, and they have a true empowerment of their employees in order to let them innovate and play around. And this also creates loyalty from the employees because they enjoy the work. So they have a culture and slogan that says hard work, not relevant. And if you want to translate it, because it can sound a bit weird and shocking, it is actually that it is not the time that you put into the work, but the result that counts. So learning skills becomes very high on the agenda at Netflix. So even though it's data driven, it's also very humane. Then we have Spotify. Spotify has always been digital in comparison to the Netflix. And it is a Swedish streaming service. And they were founded in 2006 as a response to the growing piracy problem within the music industry. And they have always been working digitally, always been more or less 100% digital, and have a culture of collaboration. What does this mean for them specifically is that they draw on each other's knowledge. So despite being in various different locations all over the world, they have this learning mentality and collaboration mentality where they always seek the knowledge from the others. So they're not worried about going to another team and say, hey, can you help me? Because we know that you have some experience in this field, or you have already dealt with this challenge. And this way they move ahead much faster. So they're really helping each other the whole way through, learning from each other. They are, of course, also highly data-driven. As a digital company, they have an easy access to collecting data, but this only helps them to be agile and responsive to any change in the market. Last but not least, Amazon. We have most probably all bought something from Amazon at least once in our life. And it started out as a traditional online bookstore. This was back in 1994. And then it was only becoming international when it also began selling music and videos in 1998. So what is Amazon's main key element when it comes to a digital culture? That is the client centricity. So what does this mean for Amazon is that it's not only the call center people who actually go on trainings in how to deal with clients. No, it's also managers at every level. They every year have minimum 2 days of training in order to be reminded and keep their focus on the client. Also, even at the boardroom in the meetings, there, Jeff Bezos, maybe some of you know, he brings an empty chair to every meeting that represents the client. Why does he do that? Is from his point of view that he's saying that you have to be client focused, because if you're competitor focused, you wait until the competitor changes something before you change. Whereas if you're customer focused, it helps you to pioneer. This of course leads to him being agile and putting learning very high on the agenda at Amazon, because he allows them to play around and find new ideas. And there's this entrepreneurial mindset at Amazon to allow the creativity and innovation at work. They, of course, are also data-driven like any company, but as you see for all three of them, they also have the human factor. It is very important that it's not only about data and numbers, but also about the people who work there and their competencies. So now this all sounds very wonderful, but how does it work in practice? Aren't there just a few barriers when we go digital? Let's compare it to the traditional companies. So we would like to discuss this with you. We would like you to just think about it, and you can either write it in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and give us a few examples very briefly of which type of cultural barriers or challenges that you have experienced due to the remote working, or even when you maybe went through processes of going digital. So do you have any? Maybe some of you, please put them in the chat or unmute yourself. We would love to hear it. We can start by giving an example. We have digital literacy. Yes, that is very true. Some people, they are more digital than others, and we need to help each other in order to become more digital. Thank you, Alicia. Anyone else who's got some ideas? Maybe that you experienced that there wasn't even, you didn't have a laptop to bring home, or your internet connection at home was poor, or maybe you suddenly realized you didn't have any set of rules of how do you communicate with your colleagues on projects when you're working from home. Is there anyone else who wants to write something?
Or maybe that some of your friends experience, because I know we exchange among my friends how they experience, for example, going digital. That can be something as well. Maybe they had some issues with being able actually to connect to the central server. They didn't have access, something like that. Maybe your friends experienced that somehow as well.
If I could, I'm glad to share some thoughts and some experiences I've had, and they include sometimes simple things that don't necessarily have to be digital, but they can be cultural based on our national cultures where we were born and raised. So if companies are working, let's say, with English as their lingua franca around the world, it doesn't necessarily mean that we understand each other. So maybe some of you have had these experiences as well, working with Asian colleagues or colleagues based in Americas or Africa or wherever, here in Europe as well, where you're using a lingua franca, you think you're communicating, but in fact, a lot of things are getting lost in the process of your communication. Why? Because there's silence, because different ways of communicating are being used, because of a whole bunch of different reasons. I don't want to take up too much of the time here, but certainly I would add that communication issues in a classic sense, also based on how we were raised, also play into the mix of this digital collaboration.
Thank you. It's very true. We have a lot of actually support now in the chat, actually supporting what you're saying, because there's the digital acceptance that people don't want to talk to the machine. They want to have the human contact. Others are saying that the team building atmosphere is there face to face, but it's very difficult to have it through digital world. Security issues, yes, it's a big one. Fear of control. Team building comes up again as an issue. For global organizations that are working across time zones, it's absolutely true. It's a lot of things to think about, isn't it? It can be very, very challenging for everyone. Well, I think, is there anyone who wants to add something? Otherwise, I will give the word to Lisa to continue on the barriers.
May I just add one thing as well? By the way, my name is Anthony Spoda and I'm working at CSNA. Indeed, I think some people are perhaps not so fond of using digital, let's say, means in the workplace. So I think that one of the problems can be that some people in the team are not accustomed and maybe not so interested in using digital means.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's certain people who really just know how to use everything and they want to have the newest model of all digital devices on the market. And then you have others that are more reluctant and prefer to meet up face to face or not to do the conference calls and so on. So absolutely. Thank you for that. Lisa, I will let the word to you.
I will move on then. Let me sum it up. So you will find some elements that you stated in the chat or just while talking with us right now. But let me just walk you through the different barriers that we could identify so far when one decides going digital. So the first one that has already been stated by some of you is the difference in digital literacy. And as you said it, like, you might have colleagues that are more techy, more fluent with technology, and some others for whom it will be more difficult to accustom to technology and especially to change technology, because maybe they're used to using one type of technology, they know the processes, and then from one day to the other, they're asked to make a shift in that. It can become quite challenging for them. Digital literacy is not linked to a generational gap. People that are older than me can be way more fluent in technology than I am, for example. So there might be some assimilation to generational gap, but it shouldn't be like digital literacy equals generational gap, definitely no. The next point that can be a barrier are the skills and resources. And there you really have to think about what type of skills do my employees have when we decide going digital. Do they have the right set of skills? Do they need some training in order to be able to use, for example, the new technology that we want to implement? For fear and resistance, what we experience is that no matter the change project that you will go through, you will experience to some extent some resistance. And when you decide going digital, the fears that you might face are people wondering, how is my daily work going to change? Am I still relevant in the job that I'm doing? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be replaced by technology at one point? And with all these fears, they might not want to move on and forward with the transformation that you decided. The next point is micromanagement, and here we refer to the change in management and leadership styles that can happen when deciding going digital. In a sense that maybe management is not so much accustomed of, for example, working remotely, and so they start maybe scrutinizing too much every single task their employees are doing. I mean, they need always to be this balance between control and autonomy, but when the control takes too much over, then it can become quite risky, also in the sense that some employees might face burnouts. You will see some demotivation or an increase in the turnover rate, and in the end what you create is actually very dependent employees because management just took over everything. The next point, the lack of customer perspectives, goes very closely together with the organizational silos, in the sense that when you have a company in which departments are working like isolated islands and do not very much communicate with each other, it will become very difficult for every department to have the global picture of what their customers actually want. And so you end up having services that might not fit as well the customer's needs on the market anymore. And that can be of an issue. The next point is information security. And you also stated that right before in the chat, when your employees actually don't know what is going to happen with their data. Is the data used to be more scrutinized, to check on what they're going to do every single day on every single task? Is it used to check on their performance, but on a negative way? The next point are the tools and processes in place. And here the big question that you have to ask is, how did you choose, for example, the tools to implement? Does it fit with the cultural reality that you have in your organization? Did you, for example, take on, for example, employees' feedback in order to see what would suit better for their reality? Or was it just decided top down? And for the processes, it's really to ask yourself, are the processes sufficiently clear, the new processes that you want to implement? Because when going digital, you will really change the processes that are in place. People have to change their routines, their way of working to some degree. For some, it will be more. For others, it will be less. But nevertheless, the changes will be there. And you, as an organization, will not face every barrier to the same degree. It will a lot also depend on the digital maturity of your organization. But to some degree, you will see some of them going on in your organization. And even though here we really talked about the barriers and maybe the more negative aspects, which is very important also to be aware of them, there are ways to leverage a digital culture. And I will hand over to Lene now in order to start introducing to what it actually takes in order to set up a digital culture inside of your organization.
Thank you, Lisa. So how can we create a digital culture? We have looked at it, the challenges, the barriers of it, and now how can we actually implement it successfully? Here we would like to introduce you to a AAA approach. And what does this mean? This is that in the first phase, what you have to do is to articulate what you want the culture to look like. So what change is required? And very important, clarify the why. It is very important to take time to go through this phase and really be clear on every step. And why are you doing it? Be transparent in the communication. Why is this cultural change happening? How can you explain it? Make people understand that it's important and why they're going through this hassle. Because only that way, when you're being transparent about it and communicating, will you also get the people to accept. There will be less resistance and they will hopefully then get on board and help you. So really communicate, be honest, clear, and articulate your why. Then you have to activate it. So when you have realized why you're doing it, what are you wanting to change, then you have to activate this new culture. And you can make it real through actions. You have to cultivate them. You have to adapt. You have to think of the leadership of it, the empowerment, what skills are needed, and the engagement of the employees, of management on all levels, because only that way will it actually work. Then last but not least, this is a very big one as well, is that you have to anchor the new culture. It is not something that just happens overnight. We all know that in order to change a habit, it will take us at least 3 months. So to change a culture of several individuals, you'll have to accept that this is a long process, a long-term project, where you're also aligning the employees and the organization. You have to think about the actions, you have to work on them to create this desired culture, reinforcing, adjusting, rethinking, re-explaining, getting everyone on board, checking out what is missing, who is happy, who is not, and so on. So it's really a long process to anchor and get it to work successfully. Now, which elements are needed to actually activate this culture and align it? What do we have to focus on? It needs to be very clear from the beginning so that you can get successfully through your digital transformation. And it's also, it depends on the different companies. It depends on your own company, the culture you had before. It depends on where you want to go, which service or product industry you're in. However, we have identified 9 different areas that we would like to focus on today together with you. It's the customer centricity, agility, and proactivity in one line. Then it's the data-driven transparency and communication in a second. And then last but not least, again, the leadership, collaboration, and empowerment of employees. So let's have a look at customer centricity. To truly focus on the customer, this needs to be implemented across entities. It needs to go through the entire company on all levels. So think again about Jeff Bezos from Amazon. He was bringing the chair into the board. He was sending people on trainings, and regardless of their position. So it's really, everyone has to be clear and have clarity on customer needs. This is also, of course, through data collection, because when you are digital, you can use those means and you can listen to the customer still. Not only just analyzing, but listen, internal and external customers. Create a dialogue with them. This can be also in the social media and the communication. Really listen, talk to them, interact, and always turn the challenge around to see it from the customer's perspective. You have to be proactive, pioneering, tightening the bond between the customer and the company long term. Then, secondly, you have to be agile. Agility and being agile is all about quick learning and being responsive. You have to be able to adapt very quickly. It requires that you have a continuous iteration where the perfection is less important because you develop with the demand of the market. You can't wait until something is perfect. You have to launch and then adapt. So it's really a continuous learning process and development within the customer's demand in order to move forward. And then you need to, of course, revisit a lot of the processes that you had in place before in order to check if operating models, methods, processes, internal, external, if they are all adapted to the agile way. Because here you will realize that there's too many steps and you have to shorten the ways. So the fewer steps possible, the more agile you can become. Then, looking at the proactivity, a lot of people mix up agility and proactivity. It's very, very close to it, but it's not the same. So what's the difference? Having a proactive culture means that you encourage the entrepreneurial thinking within your company. You look more at the bigger picture and you're more solution oriented. Then you have to be very quick in acting and doing, and you continuously learn together. You continuously invent and innovate together, finding those solutions as a team. BuzzFeed, some of you might know, is one example of such a company that had a successful activity and really changed it successfully, because it started with a very new approach to social publishing and visual content. And this has pioneered the forms of advertisement later on. Now I will, with the learning by doing, give it to Lisa.
Thank you, Lene. The next dimension for when we talk about digital culture and what does it take, it's data-driven. What do we mean by that? Is that data is going to be central in a digital culture. It will support the decision-making process, and the company is going to use data collection tools such as social media and online strategy to make a market analysis in order to better understand the customers and really also get the customer centricity, as Lene just explained it to you. It's really in order to understand what is happening there, in order to be proactive and make things happen. But you will also be able to understand the internal performance that will be happening in your organization. And there, what I said when we were talking about the barriers is really important, because it's about having performance optimization. It's helping employees to perform better, to feel better at their work, and then get their work done to the optimal way. The next point is transparency. And it's about, first of all, providing a clear vision and strategy to your employees. They really need to understand why you want to go through this digital transformation. How is it going to affect their work? And so clarify processes and standards. And there you will already take away some of the resistance that you will face from the beginning on. By knowing where they're going, they will be less scared for the future, for their workplace. And if processes are clear, they also know how you will expect them to work and deliver and perform their task. Last but not least, and I really try to underline that one, is really clarify data usage and security. People need to know what is going to happen with their data, so they feel also more comfortable with sharing that one. The last point is, the next point, because we still have some going on, is communication. And here it's about having a transparent and open communication. Get in touch with your employees on a regular basis to keep track of what they're doing. And here again, it comes back to having the right balance of control and autonomy in order to let them work also on an autonomous way, but still know where they're going, provide the guidelines, provide the big picture. It's about taking a continuous and goal-oriented approach and online and digital interaction with all stakeholders. Employees, yes, of course, on a regular basis, but the other stakeholders as well. The frequency, I would say, on the interaction will vary depending on the stakeholders and the stakeholder needs. But when you are online, it's really important. When you're digital, it's very important that you are regularly in touch with people. That being said, about the communication, let's dive into the leadership aspects with Lene.
Thank you, Lisa. So, leadership. It is indeed also very important that the leader communicates, and he has to really be aligned with the values of the strategy in order to frame and anchor the culture. He has to really communicate very clearly what it is that they want to achieve from a management perspective and how they're going to include everyone on all levels. So a leader needs to be serving. What does that mean? That means that he needs to focus on adding value to the team so that they can truly successfully implement everything. This he has to do by mentoring, he has to listen, he has to learn together with the team and lead the team without imposing, but making everyone getting on the same page with a certain speed, but still with room for everyone not to be stressed. So what is the most important is actually that he mentors in a way that the team grows so independent and can achieve without the leader hardly being noticed. So they will feel empowered, they will feel capable, they will feel secure. They will feel that they are appreciated. And this is also where the leader has to show gratitude to strengthen this team cohesion and support our next point, which is collaboration. So in order to create a functional and collective intelligent collaboration, the diversity and inclusion needs to be prioritized and balanced throughout the company. It needs to create an optimum where you avoid the over-inclusion and you also avoid the under-inclusion. So you really have to get the balance right in order to obtain productivity at a high level, that people feel that they're collaborating and engaging, that they have the same amount of information and can share openly. The team needs to work towards this goal together. They have to put all the selfishness aside when they're connecting and collaborating, and it should hopefully be without competition or distrust. This needs to be really worked on a conscious basis, because especially when we're working remotely and we don't see people, our brains are naturally biased towards acting selfishly and herding all the information for us, and our own interest comes first. So therefore, it needs to really be switched on a regular basis, that you see the person, that you communicate and understand that we are into this together, and we forget our own agenda when working together as a team. And this is so important that we don't forget this human touch in order to co-create and experiment together also online. And there's a lot of tools out there to do this. So it is possible, but it has to be provoked. It has to be integrated in the culture. Also, in a collaborative culture, silos often exist. And this is something that you have to avoid in a digital world, especially because otherwise the teams will not know what the others are doing. Think of Spotify, they always collaborate, they find the best talent in another team, even if it's in another country. So they really create those cross-functional teams in order to work together. And they can work autonomously together, they can exist as teams and know that they can rely on each other. Again, here the leader has to do a good job in leading it to get to this, and then to be almost invisible, because the team will just react and get on it with themselves. They're self-organized, they're autonomous in the end, and they can experiment, co-create until the best solution is found, and then it will be presented. This leads to the skills, the empowerment of the team. So this is the last element, but it's not the least important. It's actually a very important one, because for all the cultural elements to shine through, the employees need to feel empowered. They need to have developed this responsibility through guiding principles that they get. They have to have a clear understanding that their judgment is also valid and valued, that the leaders can trust them, and there's no need for micromanagement then. So they have to get help maybe in the beginning, especially with their work-life balance. Here they need to be empowered through getting help in what does it mean to work from home, or what does it mean to work digitally? Do I have to be connected all the time, or can I take time off for myself? There's a lot of questions that arise, and here it's so important that the people, they get the help, they get the best practices, they get the guidelines, and it should be of a concern to the company. So this is also, if you think about hyperconnectivity or their IT skills, everything, you know, from soft skills to hard skills, it really, they need this help in order to find their balance. You can have some people who you have to consider together with HR, how can we create trainings to help the people to get them on more or less the same level of digital know-how, look at generational gaps, or as Lisa mentioned, you can have also younger people where you think, oh, but they're tech savvy, right? Because they grew up with it. But the fact is, maybe they just know how to use WhatsApp and send an email and not very interested in other topics, and therefore they also need help. So really to identify on which level everyone is, so that they can get the best help possible to be as efficient as possible, as fast as possible. This will then also avoid them feeling lost. They will feel equal, they will not be fearing anything. And then you have to really show this trust, continuous basis, allowing them to grow, allowing to empower them through trainings or through, even webinars as you are on today, and show them this respect and show them the way, give them also the space to grow because we don't always learn something from one day to the other. It might take some time to really optimize our skills. But once it's done, it will really pay back tenfold, because the employees that feel empowered and engaged, they will also be so much more loyal, and they will go the extra mile for the company. So to leave you with this, our really message is that when you go digital, when you create a digital culture, please do serve your people in the sense of listen to them, learn together, and lead in a way that they can suddenly judge, and you can basically take a step back and you can have a trust between you. The worst thing you can do is to, with the data, micromanage and be on them all the time, because you can't trust your people. I think the COVID situation has actually proven it. A lot of companies are surprised how well it works to work from home. So with those words, we would like to open up for discussion. Do you have any questions, any takes on it yourself, ideas that you want to share with us?
Some best practices, for example, that you experienced also while you were working remotely?
Questions? You can use the chat, or you can unmute yourself.
Maybe I'll take the initiative to get us started, maybe. In terms of, you mentioned something very interesting, this AAA, right? Articulate, activate, and anchor, I wrote to myself. Could you elaborate about how you define the desired culture? So in the articulation phase, right, the very beginning, what is it linked to? How do you, maybe at MindForest, what is your approach? How do you bring this out so you know what is this desired culture that that you want, that we all want to create? How are you defining it? How are you drawing that out? Based on what?
It's very, very individual, because you always have to take the culture that is already existing, because there's a reason there is a certain culture in a company. This can be through history, it can be through the management, or a new CEO coming in wanting to put their touch on the culture. It also comes with the employees, the values that have been identified. So it's a very long process, because you have to together clarify what it is that you actually are moving towards. Also, how digital are you going in terms of products and services with your customers? What do they need? So it is really a lot of work inside of you of saying, why are we doing this? Understanding what you need in order to get through it and get to the goal of your digitalization, because it's different for some companies. If we take the example of Netflix in the beginning, they used to be a completely traditional company renting out DVDs, and then at some point decided to go completely digital. So why did they do that? You have to look at it from the history of the company and what you then need to put in place. It's very, very individual for MindForest itself, because we very much collaborate together. There was an initiative launched to see what each of us really liked and wanted to have as a digital culture, which tools we preferred, how we prefer to communicate, how to work together, and so on. So, and it's something that, of course, has to be elaborated the whole time as you grow. It's not
if I could just add, I think from our perspective, what we like to do is link it very much with the strategy of the client.
Yeah.
So it's always basically it goes hand in hand, right? So the culture is supporting the strategy of that client. So those two things really come together, whether it's digital or non-digital, but certainly in a digital environment where we're moving so much faster and where the variables are harder to manage, the strategy part is really the underpinning of everything that the company could do.
Absolutely. That's why I chose the example with Netflix, because they moved a new strategy to go digital, and therefore they had to change everything to get there. Steps have to be reviewed, processes, everything. It's a long-term project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia.
Yeah, I just would like to reinforce what you've been saying, and Lene Pedersen are answering to Thomas, why changing a culture to a digital new reality, it's very hard. And it's because long ago, I've heard one of the best culture definitions I've listened to, and which says is that a culture in the company is what happens when we are not looking. So if you can imagine that, even if we have our policies, our processes, all of those things linked to the strategy, to the vision, to the values of the company, beside of being stated on paper, on walls, but it's really the people's behavior what drives that, and that happens when we are not looking. And beside of having all our managers align and engage in according to the strategy, to the values, sometimes it's those ALSs, those authentic informed leaders, informal leaders that really drive a culture company towards a digital transformation to be successful or not. Thank you.
Absolutely right. You are absolutely spot on with that quote of saying culture is what happens when you're not looking. And I think even the COVID situation has, for some companies, shown them where they need to work a bit and where they may be positively surprised because people have engaged and been very loyal to each other. There's an interesting question just coming in that I think actually you would like to answer, Lisa, but I will read it up for you. It is, in your view, in a company, who's best to lead a digitalization initiative project? Is it the business, IT, the internal customer department that benefits the most?
Well, it goes together with what we saw at the very beginning, I would say, in the presentation, in the sense that some companies decide to bring in a lot of what they call in some articles gurus, digital gurus, thinking that because they know the best practices and how to go by the book, they will be able to implement also digital initiatives. But in the end, what they really found out is that when you have insiders on board, maybe people that might not be so tech savvy or into digitalization, they might actually be able to run the project and to run it towards success, in the sense that they know the culture. They are maybe resistant at the beginning, but they will understand the resistance that is going on and what is making them so resistant. And then they can just talk other people through it and help them also to be on board of the project and have the project and the digitalization or the digital transformation coming in, getting along. So it's really not about being the best in digital transformation, but it's about having people on board that know the internal culture in order, and as Elisa said it, to understand what is happening when you're not looking in the end. And that's how you can the best go through a digital transformation.
I think I'll add that it's important, of course, that they work together with the IT department and so on to find the correct tools. But it's very important that, for example, IT tools as such are not just imposed, but that the need of the different departments is very much understood, so that you don't invest in something that is actually not very useful afterwards, or makes life even more complicated in some situations. So it's very much a mix, but it's so important that they understand the human factor as well, yes, in order to be successful.
IT should support the transformation that you're going through. It should not be the goal as such.
Yes. Anyone else who's got a question? Please do either unmute yourself or write in the chat.
Me again, just to reinforce now Lisa's answer. In every transformation, every organization, independently if it's IT or non-IT, you shouldn't put the object as the main rock guiding your change. You should be focused on people, because at the end it will be them who will take on that, who will be using that, who will adopt that. So if you want to drive a digital transformation, don't do it on top of the IT. Even if that's the last Rolls Royce that's on the market, and you want to be on top or lots of miles in front of your competitors, use your people, because in the end, they will be the ones that they will help your company driving forward using that. But you have to choose even that rock, a rock that will fit in the hands of the people, that your people will be comfortable using it, will be pushed forward, looking at the benefits that rock can bring to them and at the end to the company.
It's really about the collaboration and co-creation aspect, that you consult your people in order to make sure that your solution that you want to bring in will fit for everybody, or at least for most of the people that are part of the company.
Other questions? No more questions?
I'll take a stab at it. Regarding agile, right? We mentioned the magical word, and you had some, of course, perfect examples, including Spotify and Netflix and Amazon. I'm just wondering, it's a little bit normative in my head to think agile is a solution for all. So maybe you could elaborate on, how do you see agile? When does it become something that is worth considering? And what are the limitations of agile? Yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that.
So agile is only one aspect, and that's also why it's part of the 9 dimensions that we now mentioned here. Those are 9 that we have seen on a regular basis, and why we chose those to present them today. But as you say, it's absolutely not. You cannot only be agile. From those 9 dimensions, you will have a bit of everything. You will have some that shine through for your culture more than others. But the agile point of view is really that when you work in a digital world, you have to be so much more responsive. You have to be able to bend very quickly to change and accept this change. And this is where the agility comes in. I don't know, does that help you a bit in the answering?
Certainly partially, yeah. I'm thinking of some examples, some clients and others that we probably all are aware of, that have strong hierarchical structures. So at the same time that they have agile units, let's say, or divisions, they have at the same time a very powerful hierarchy in silo type styles. I'm thinking of some companies, without mentioning names now, in Asia that do both. So it's a hybrid approach. So do you have would you be able to comment on that? What, in terms of your digitalization strategy, does one preclude the other? Do you have to get rid of silos in order to have, let's say, fast, iterative digital ways of working with strong collaborative teams? Or can you have both? And how can you have both?
I would definitely prefer to have the collaborative way, but I do know that some cultures are not yet allowing it, let's put it that way. And where there's still a strong hierarchy, there the communication comes into play then. Because if you have to be very transparent and fast with the communication if you are maintaining hierarchy. But silos and agility is a bit contradictory, because you just don't get the information across as fast, and you don't use the competencies of the people to, let's say, to the maximum. Because if you are not collaborating together, you don't know that maybe in another department they already have the answer to your challenge, and you're reinventing the wheel in your own little corner. And that is where you either have to then have really cross communication that works so well that when you can go to another department, but it will always slow down when there's not this collaboration and communication between departments. So to really be functional, this is my perspective on it, is really that you have to collaborate and know each other's competencies in the different departments, not necessarily of each specific person, especially if we're thinking larger organizations, but that you know that you can go to this department, or that this part of the company in another country have had the similar issue and dealt with it, so that you can get inspiration. It's, for me, silos are not favorable.
I agree with Lene. A perfect agile environment doesn't need hierarchies and even bosses, because people know what they have to do. They know their skills, they know their knowledge, they know their capabilities. They are able to reorganize and to work together towards a same goal and to collaborate. We have, for example, design thinking as a tool where that happens. However, companies that apply, for example, that tool, they don't apply it a second time. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. No, it's my take on it. It's the general of MindForest. We're really not in favor of silos because you cannot co-create them.
I have a related question to that. What would you recommend if you have a company that is either international, working worldwide because it's a big company or because they have partners worldwide, or let me call it a transgenerational company? I'll give you two examples to illustrate what I mean by that. That actually happens is that for those of us who have teenager or grown-up kids, we've all had the case that they go like, I talked to him yesterday. And we say, you didn't see anyone yesterday. Yeah, I talked to him. So they're beyond video, they texting. So if they use a tool like Slack, they prefer to write than to speak. Even as maybe older generation will feel this takes more time than just hopping on the call. So that's what I do with my team sometimes, or even being in the same office, they would send you an email and you just walk there and say, here's the answer to your email or to your Slack or your message. And the other example, I was talking with a friend yesterday and he's in Cayman Islands where, say, the culture is different. And he was telling me the way they have to watch how people are working is they hop on a video call, on a conference call, just to be there, just to watch. They don't work together, but they're just on a video watch if you want, because then the person knows I'm being watched and now I have to work. So what's the recommendation based on such examples? Do you have to have one policy, one size fits all inside of a company? Or might it be that you have to adjust based on who you're talking to, who you're working with, or where the people are?
I see it's two very different, let's say, issues that you are raising, because one of them is the different use of tools. You mentioned Slack, which is very good for an instant message, quick question or something, but you can of course also jump on calls via Slack and video calls and share screens and so on, like we're doing here. But it really depends on what you need to do, because if it's just to ask a quick question to someone, it's fine to send an instant message or something. But if you need to really discuss something or co-create together, it's much more important that you see the mimic of the person, because communication is not only in the writing. You miss out on so much, or you can even have misunderstandings because you express yourself in the wrong way. So this is something to really consider, especially when you work international, where you have different cultures that come at play, and maybe people not all speaking the mother tongue. So there's small, fine nuances in the language that they don't really get or understand or use wrongly. So I think it's of course a generational thing as well, because it's true. There's a lot of people today that are just, instant messaging, WhatsApp or wherever. However, for a longer discussion or an important co-creation, something, developing of a project, it cannot only go via email. So you really have to give some best practices also for the productivity, that you show when is it better to use which media, which channel, and also in order not to get people totally confused and worried about, am I using the right or the wrong one? So it's really a question of best practices. You mentioned this thing about being watched over video so that you were working. I call that micromanagement, because you have to be able to trust your people, and you have to be able to say it's not the 8 hours that you have to work, it's the outcome, and that you can see that they are working because they're producing something. But if you're counting the minutes and feel that there's a necessity to watch the people without actually having a real reason, but just being on video to ensure, then there is a lack of trust in the culture, which is not very healthy long term, neither for the management nor for the employees. And it can be very, very stressful and have also an impact on the work-life balance. So for me, of course, there's differences in personalities as well. There's some people, they're absolutely fine with the remote working, where they're not sitting, together with people. They can be in their own corner. And then there's others that are more extrovert and need to see people almost every day. But you also have some introverts who have realized that during this confinement period that they could express themselves much better on a video call than when they were in a meeting. There could be the same, let's say 10 people in the meeting, but if it was in the video call, they had less of an issue expressing themselves. So it's very much of a personality question on what you're getting used to. I'm sure there was also some people fearing it in the beginning because they had not tried it before. So it's for the company to give the best practices and guidelines, but watching people working via videos, for me, more in terms of micromanagement and a distrust somewhere.
Right. So basically what you're saying is that you have to have a set of guidelines, but these guidelines have to be flexible enough for personal interpretation based on how your preference is in working.
Yeah. I mean, it is really, it's the same for everyone, that we work differently. So if we have some guidelines and we know which tools we can use and so on, then it's normally people are responsible enough and grown up enough when we are working that we can discuss with people and then say, listen, I don't really like the WhatsApp instant messaging or Slack. Can we have a call instead? I like to see you, or depending on what you are doing.
Yeah, and the example I was mentioning from this friend yesterday, it's in a very traditional and hence traditional-minded company and business field. So that's probably next. I have a counterexample of people that are creative and they call each other on Zoom just to sit near each other. So everyone's just not to be alone. They don't necessarily talk, but it's like they're sitting next to each other.
Yeah, no, it's
creation.
Exactly. I mean, and sometimes it's also to use tools like Mural or Miro or something, where you can brainstorm together, create mind maps or whatever it is that you need for your projects, draw together online and so on. It can make it much more lively and also much more productive if you have a quick brainstorm and feel that you are together in this, and don't forget the human factor as well. So absolutely. Do you have a comment on it, Lisa?
I would just say how we did it. We have like general guidelines, as Lene was stating it, but then we have meetings where we all together put on the cameras just to see us. And then depending on the projects and how people feel actually talking to each other, it will be over Slack, it will be over Zoom, or it will be just writing. But we have general guidelines on how it should be done. But then depending on each team project, we just adjust it and make it more comfortable for anybody. But definitely there's not anybody just getting in there to watch us how we work. I think that most of us would be very uncomfortable with a dimension like that on our daily life.
Yeah. So just a quick question coming in. Could you talk about some examples in terms of timeframes for a digital transformation journey? No, in the sense of there is no specific one rule fits all, because it depends on what the maturity that you start from and what you are digitalizing. So it's very difficult to give a time frame, but of course it depends on the typical project. I don't know, are you thinking of something specific, Thomas, or because it's very individual from the company of their maturity, where they start, what they want to implement, where they want to go. Also the size of the company. There's a lot of things that come into play.
I agree.
Okay, good. We're slowly running out and coming to an end. So I think, yeah, Paul also wrote that the optimal timeline is continuously ongoing. Absolutely, yeah, that's a good answer as well, because it's something that continues. We experience it ourselves, don't we? That there's more and more things possible online, and we have to adapt. So we would like to say thank you to everyone. And just letting you know that we actually already on Wednesday have a webinar on presenting online and engaging your audience. So if you're interested, please do sign up for it. We'll be happy to welcome you. And then, of course, also, if you like the content, we hope you did, then you can sign up for our newsletter, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn. And from our side, thank you very much. And also thank you to Amcham for having us. I give the word to Paul so that you can close. If Paul is there. Have we lost Paul? No, we haven't lost Paul, but he is on mute. I'll unmute you. We can
Unmute now. Ah, that's better. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Sorry about that. I want to very much thank MindForest for the obvious time and effort that they put into going ahead and making this work for us today. Thank you, ladies, very much. And I also want to thank you all who have joined us today. You know, we are at the start of a journey which is going to continue for a long period of time. Anyone who thinks that this is easy and anyone who thinks that this is fun needs to go back to bed and sleep for a couple more hours and get up and rethink it. This is going to be quite a challenge for us as a society to work through. I remember the first time that the Luxembourg government went ahead and made arrangements so that you could digitally send your tax returns. You know what they did? You digitally sent your tax return, and they hired a lady who would print the tax returns out and then take the physical copies that had been sent by email and put them into the system the same way that had always been done before. That obviously is not the optimal kind of a digital transformation. You know, so the takeaway that I got from this was reinforcing mostly that this is indeed about culture, and it is indeed about people, and getting people committed and willing to think in a new way and engage in a new way. So, and that's about people. So we hope that you enjoyed it today. Please remember MindForest and stay engaged with them. Please remember Amcham and stay engaged with us. And we look forward to seeing you again the next time. Thank you all very, very much.